The rescue. Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't expected to find anything extraordinary during her routine geological survey of Europa's ice sheets. The Jupiter moon's frozen surface had yielded little beyond mineral samples and the occasional microfossil. But as her scanner picked up an anomalous heat signature deep within a newly formed crevasse, she knew this expedition would be different. "Base, this is Chen," she radioed, adjusting her suit's thermal regulators against the bitter cold. "I'm detecting something unusual in Sector 7. Requesting permission to investigate." "Negative, Dr. Chen," came the immediate response. "Storm front approaching. All personnel are ordered to return immediately." Sarah hesitated, watching her scanner's display. The signature was fading rapidly. Whatever was down there wouldn't survive much longer in Europa's hostile environment. She made her decision. "Sorry, base. Breaking up. Can't hear." She switched off her radio. The descent into the crevasse was treacherous. Massive ice sheets groaned and shifted around her as she rappelled deeper into the azure darkness. Her helmet lights revealed ghostly patterns in the ancient ice, but she remained focused on the weakening heat signature. 50 meters down, she found it. At first, the crystalline formation appeared natural, just another ice formation. But as she drew closer, she saw the truth. Embedded within the translucent ice was a pod, its metallic surface etched with intricate patterns unlike anything in human engineering. And inside, barely visible through a frosted viewport, was a face. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The being inside was humanoid but clearly alien. Its skin a pale lavender, features delicate and almost luminescent. Most striking were its eyes, open and alert, watching her with an intelligence that sent shivers down her spine unrelated to the cold. The alien's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. It was alive, but barely. The pod's systems were failing, its power source nearly depleted. Sarah knew the protocol for discovering extraterrestrial life. Report immediately. Maintain distance. Wait for containment teams. She also knew that by the time such teams arrived, the being before her would be dead. "I must be insane," she muttered, pulling out her plasma torch. The alien's eyes tracked her movements as she began cutting through the ice. "Don't worry," she found herself saying, though she knew the being couldn't understand. "I'm going to get you out of there." It took 20 precious minutes to free the pod. By then, her suit's warning systems were screaming about the approaching storm. The pod was surprisingly light, its surface warm to the touch despite its icy prison. Sarah attached it to her climbing harness, muscles straining as she began the ascent. They barely made it. The storm hit just as Sarah dragged the pod into her research rover, the vehicle's sturdy frame shuddering against the howling winds. Inside, she quickly established an environmental seal and began examining her discovery. The pod's opening mechanism proved surprisingly simple, responding to direct pressure on its geometric patterns. As the seal broke with a soft hiss, Sarah found herself face to face with her alien passenger. Up close, she could see that its lavender skin was marked with subtle, shifting patterns, like oil on water. The being was slender, dressed in a form-fitting garment that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Its eyes met hers, deep violet with flecks of silver, and Sarah saw pain there, along with fear and desperate hope. The alien's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Instead, it raised a trembling hand toward her faceplate. Sarah made another decision. She removed her helmet. The alien's fingers were cool against her cheek, its touch impossibly gentle. A sense of gratitude washed over her, so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Somehow, she knew this feeling wasn't her own. It was being projected, shared. The moment was shattered by her rover's emergency radio crackling to life. "Dr. Chen, do you copy? What's your status?" The alien's hand withdrew, its expression becoming guarded. Sarah knew she had minutes before search teams would brave the storm to find her. What she'd done, breaking quarantine, making contact with an alien life form, would end her career at best, and at worst. "I won't let them hurt you," she promised, surprising herself with her conviction. "But you need to trust me. Can you do that?" The alien studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It understood. Sarah quickly wrapped her discovery in thermal blankets, concealing its alien nature. "Base, this is Chen," she radioed. "Took shelter in a crevasse. Storm caught me off guard. No samples collected. Requesting pickup when conditions permit." As she waited for rescue, watching the alien drift into an exhausted sleep, Sarah knew her life would never be the same. She had no idea what this being was, where it came from, or why it was hidden in Europa's ice. But she knew with unshakable certainty that she would protect it, no matter the cost. The storm raged on, and in its howling winds, Sarah Chen could almost hear the sound of destiny shifting course. Breaking barriers. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah smuggled her alien guest into her private research facility on Europa's surface. She'd managed to convince the base authorities that her prolonged absence during the storm had been due to equipment failure, but she knew it was only a matter of time before someone grew suspicious of her increased isolation and strange supply requests. The alien, whom Sarah had begun calling Nova due to the star-like glimmers that occasionally rippled across its skin, was recovering rapidly. Its pod, now carefully hidden beneath the floorboards of her lab, had contained several vials of what appeared to be medical supplies. Through careful observation, and more than a few leaps of intuition, Sarah had determined which ones were meant for healing. "Your cellular regeneration rate is remarkable," Sarah murmured, examining Nova through her microscope. The alien sat patiently on her examination table, watching her work with those impossibly deep violet eyes. A small wound on its arm, sustained during their escape from the crevasse, had nearly vanished, leaving only a faint silvery trace. Nova reached out, touching the screen where Sarah had been documenting her observations. Its fingers traced the human writing with evident fascination. Though unable to speak, the alien had proven remarkably adept at conveying complex ideas through gesture and emotional projection. Sarah had quickly learned to interpret these silent communications, finding herself increasingly amazed by Nova's intelligence and gentle curiosity. "You want to learn our writing?" Sarah asked, pulling up a basic language program on her tablet. Nova nodded enthusiastically, the patterns on its skin brightening with interest. The next few hours passed in a blur of shared discovery. Nova absorbed information at an astounding rate, quickly grasping the basics of written English. More fascinating still was the alien's method of teaching Sarah its own language, a complex system of bioluminescent patterns that shifted and flowed across its skin like living calligraphy. Their lesson was interrupted by an urgent alert from Sarah's security system. Someone was approaching the lab. "Quick," Sarah whispered, ushering Nova into the concealed panic room she'd hastily constructed. "Stay quiet." She had barely sealed the hidden door when Dr. Marcus Webb, her department head, strode into the lab. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah knew him well enough to sense his suspicion. "Dr. Chen," he said, glancing around the cluttered space, "you've been missing a lot of staff meetings lately." "Sorry, sir. I've been focused on analyzing those ice core samples from the crevasse." The lie came easily now, though each one weighed heavily on her conscience. Marcus picked up one of her tablets, frowning at the language program still displayed on the screen. "Interesting choice of study material." "Hobby project," Sarah said quickly. "The isolation out here. Sometimes I need a distraction." "Indeed." He set down the tablet. "You know, there's been some unusual energy readings coming from this sector, patterns that don't match any known geological activity." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "The recent storm may have damaged some of our monitoring equipment. I can run a diagnostic." "That won't be necessary." Marcus cut her off. "A specialist team is arriving tomorrow. They'll do a thorough sweep of all research stations in this quadrant." The threat was clear. Sarah maintained her composure until Marcus left, then rushed to the panic room. Nova was waiting, its skin patterns conveying clear anxiety. "We have to leave," Sarah said, already gathering essential supplies. "They'll find us if we stay." Nova's expression grew solemn. It moved to the center of the room, and to Sarah's astonishment, began manipulating the air itself. Shimmering patterns of energy formed between its outstretched hands, coalescing into a holographic star map. One system pulsed with particular brightness. Nova pointed to it, then to itself, its meaning clear: home. "Is that where you were trying to go when you crashed?" Sarah asked. Nova nodded, then pointed to another location, Earth's solar system, and made a gesture that somehow conveyed both warning and urgency. "You came here to warn us about something," Sarah realized. The alien confirmed with a grave nod, its skin patterns shifting to darker hues that Sarah had learned to associate with danger. Their time had run out. Whatever Nova had risked everything to tell humanity, they wouldn't learn it here. Sarah quickly packed her emergency supplies and the aliens' medical materials. "My personal shuttle is docked on the far side of the station," she told Nova. "If we time it right, we can slip away during shift change. But once we do this," she hesitated, "there's no going back. I'll be considered a traitor, a thief." Nova touched her hand, sharing a feeling of such profound gratitude and trust that tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. In that moment, she knew she would follow this mysterious being across the galaxy if necessary. Something greater than her career, greater than herself, was at stake. As they prepared for their escape, Sarah thought of all she was leaving behind: her life's work, her reputation, her future in the scientific community. But as she looked at Nova, saw the mixture of determination and hope in those alien eyes, she felt no regret. Whatever darkness had driven Nova to seek out humanity, whatever warning it carried, Sarah knew she had to help deliver it, even if it meant becoming a fugitive among her own people. The next few hours would determine whether they found freedom or capture. As Sarah began implementing her escape plan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was taking part in something historic, a moment that would reshape the relationship between humanity and the stars forever. The pursuit. Sarah's shuttle cut through space, engines straining as they pushed away from Europa's icy surface. The escape had been cleaner than she'd dared hope. A carefully timed systems malfunction during shift change had given them the precious minutes needed to reach the small craft and break orbit. But their victory was short-lived. As they cleared Jupiter's magnetic field, the shuttle's sensors lit up with multiple pursuit signatures. "That's at least 3 security vessels," Sarah muttered, checking their heading. Beside her in the co-pilot's seat, Nova's skin pulsed with patterns of concern. The alien leaned forward, placing its slender fingers on the navigation console. Immediately, the displays flickered and changed, showing routes and trajectories Sarah had never seen before. "You can interface with our technology?" she asked, amazed. Nova nodded, its skin rippling with urgent patterns. Through their growing emotional connection, Sarah understood. The alien was offering to help them evade capture. A warning shot from the nearest pursuit vessel lit up space beside them. "Unauthorized shuttle, this is Europa's security command. Power down immediately, or we will be forced to take hostile action." Sarah switched off the comm system. "Show me," she told Nova. What followed was like nothing in Sarah's years of spaceflight training. Under Nova's guidance, they wove through Jupiter's complex system of satellites and debris, using the gravitational fields of smaller moons to mask their signature. The aliens' understanding of spatial dynamics was incredible, turning their humble shuttle into a craft that seemed to dance between danger and safety. But their pursuers were persistent and well-equipped. As they approached the asteroid belt, a new alarm blared. Ships approaching from the Mars defense perimeter. "They're boxing us in," Sarah realized. Nova's patterns shifted to deep purple, a color Sarah had learned meant tactical thinking. The alien pointed to a dense cluster of asteroids ahead, then made a gesture Sarah interpreted as hide. Understanding dawned. "The old mining outposts," she said. "Some of them are still operational. If we can reach one." Nova confirmed with a quick nod, already feeding new coordinates into their navigation system. Sarah had heard of these outposts, automated facilities carved into larger asteroids, still extracting precious metals with minimal human oversight, perfect for someone trying to disappear. Their shuttle ducked into the asteroid field, pursuing ships falling back to avoid the dangerous debris. Nova's calculations proved perfect, guiding them through the chaos until a particular asteroid loomed before them. Larger than most, its surface dotted with ancient mining equipment. Sarah spotted the hidden docking port exactly where Nova had indicated it would be. As they made their approach, however, Nova suddenly stiffened. Its skin flared with patterns Sarah had never seen before, jagged, aggressive shapes that radiated fear and recognition. "What's wrong?" she asked, but her question was answered by new contacts on their sensors. 3 ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their configurations unlike anything in human databases. They moved with impossible precision, cutting off all escape routes. Nova's fingers flew across the console, bringing up a secure channel. A harsh, guttural language filled the shuttle's cabin. The alien skin had gone almost white with what Sarah could only interpret as terror. "Who are they?" she whispered. Nova turned to her, its expression grim. Through their connection, Sarah felt waves of memory, worlds burning, civilizations falling, all before an implacable force that consumed knowledge and culture with mechanical efficiency. The archivists, Nova conveyed somehow. They collected the wisdom and technology of other species, preserving it while destroying its creators. They were the reason Nova had fled to warn humanity, the reason it had been pursued across the stars. And now they had found them. "The human vessels are still coming," Sarah said, watching their sensors. "If they see these new ships..." Nova nodded gravely. First contact between humanity and these archivists would mean war, a war humanity couldn't hope to win. Not yet. Sarah made a decision. "Hold on," she said, pushing their shuttle's engines to maximum thrust. Instead of heading for the mining port, she aimed directly for a narrow gap between 2 massive asteroids. The alien ships followed, their superior technology allowing them to close the distance rapidly. But Sarah had grown up in the belt, learning its dangers and possibilities from veteran miners. She knew things about asteroid dynamics that even Nova's advanced calculations couldn't account for. As they threaded through the gap, Sarah fired their remaining maneuvering fuel in a precise burst. The explosion wasn't much, but it was enough to disturb the delicate gravitational balance of the 2 asteroids. With a grinding sound that vibrated through their hull, the massive rocks began to shift. The alien ships, too close to alter course, were forced to pull back as a cascade of debris filled space behind the shuttle. Sarah didn't waste the opportunity, diving deep into a maze of tumbling rocks and ancient mining structures. When they finally emerged on the other side, their pursuers, both human and archivist, were gone, lost in the chaos they'd created. But Sarah knew their reprieve would be temporary. They needed a plan, a way to prepare humanity for what was coming without starting an immediate conflict. Nova touched her arm, sharing images of a place, a hidden sanctuary where its people had once gathered to protect their knowledge from the archivists, a place where they might find the resources to save both their civilizations. "Show me," Sarah said. As Nova began plotting their course to this secret refuge, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had become a fugitive from her own people, guardian of an alien refugee, and now possibly one of the few humans who knew about a threat to all civilization. But as she looked at Nova, saw the trust and determination in those otherworldly eyes, she felt no doubt. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of 2 peoples, perhaps of all sentient life, might depend on it. The shuttle limped forward on its remaining fuel, carrying its unlikely crew toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the asteroid field slowly settled back into its ancient dance, hiding their passage from any who might follow. Hidden truths. 3 days of faster-than-light travel brought Sarah and Nova to the edges of charted space. Their shuttle, modified with technology from Nova's survival pod, pushed through the void toward coordinates that existed in no human star chart. Sarah had spent much of the journey learning more of Nova's bioluminescent language, while Nova continued to master written English with remarkable speed. "The sanctuary," Sarah said, watching new constellations drift past their viewport. "You still haven't told me exactly what we'll find there." Nova's skin rippled with complex patterns that Sarah now recognized as a mixture of hope and apprehension. The alien touched the console, bringing up a holographic display of a massive structure. A space station unlike anything humans had built, its architecture flowing like frozen music through the void. Through their strengthened mental connection, Nova shared images of what the sanctuary had once been, a great library of species and civilizations, hidden from the archivists by technologies so advanced they seemed like magic. But more than that, it had been a place of communion between different species, where knowledge and culture flowed freely between the stars. "Your people were the guardians," Sarah realized, reading the patterns across Nova's skin. "You protected the combined wisdom of multiple civilizations." Nova nodded, but its expression grew somber. More images flowed between them. The sanctuary under attack, not by the archivists, but by something else. Internal strife. Betrayal. The station's location had been compromised, forcing most of Nova's people to flee, scattering their precious knowledge across the galaxy. An alert from their sensors interrupted the exchange. They had arrived. The sanctuary hung before them, a shadow of the glorious structure from Nova's memories. Much of its outer ring had been destroyed, and large sections lay dark and lifeless. But at its core, lights still pulsed with a faint, steady rhythm. As they approached, Sarah noticed something odd about the debris field surrounding the station. "These aren't all from the sanctuary," she said, examining their readings. "Some of these pieces, they're much older." Nova's skin patterns shifted to a deep, contemplative blue. The alien gestured for Sarah to enhance the scan of a particular section of debris. What she saw made her breath catch. The fragments were clearly artificial, but their design was hauntingly familiar. That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "These match patterns from Earth's earliest civilizations. The geometric alignments, the material compositions, they're like advanced versions of artifacts we found in ancient ruins." Through their connection, Nova confirmed her suspicion. Its people hadn't just been guardians of knowledge. They had been guides, subtly steering younger civilizations toward the stars. Earth had been one of their projects, until the betrayal forced them to abandon their work. "So all those ancient astronaut theories," Sarah laughed softly. "They weren't completely wrong. They just had the details mixed up." Their moment of revelation was cut short by a warning signal. Another ship was approaching, a sleek vessel that Nova immediately recognized. Its skin patterns shifted to display relief and welcome. "Friends of yours?" Sarah asked. Nova nodded enthusiastically, already establishing communication. The language that filled their cabin was musical, flowing like water through crystal. Nova's patterns brightened as it responded, explaining their situation to the newcomer. The other ship guided them to a hidden docking port, still operational after all these centuries. As they secured their shuttle, Sarah felt Nova's growing excitement. They weren't the only survivors who had found their way back to the sanctuary. The airlock cycled, and Sarah found herself face to face with 3 more of Nova's kind. They were similar in basic form but displayed subtle variations in height, coloring, and pattern complexity. All 3 stared at her with obvious curiosity. The tallest of the group stepped forward, its skin displaying patterns of formal greeting. Through Nova, Sarah understood their names: Lyra, Atlas, and Vega. They were historians, scientists, and warriors who had dedicated their lives to protecting their people's legacy. "Welcome, Sarah Chen," Lyra said, speaking perfect English. "Nova has shared with us your courage and compassion. You are the first human to walk these halls in over 10,000 years." Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. 10,000. You've been watching us that long. Longer, Atlas added. We helped your ancestors build their first cities, taught them to look to the stars. When we had to leave, we hoped humanity would continue to grow, to learn, to reach for the heavens on their own. And you have, Vega said, its patterns showing pride. Despite our absence, despite the archivist's interference, humanity has persevered. That is why Nova risked everything to warn you. The archivists are coming, but this time, we believe humanity might be ready to stand with us against them. Nova moved to Sarah's side, its patterns interweaving with her own faint bioelectrical field in a way that made her skin tingle. Through their connection, Sarah felt the alien's absolute certainty. Humanity's creativity, resilience, and determination made them perfect allies in the coming conflict. But first, Lyra said, gesturing toward the sanctuary's depths, there is much you need to know. About us, about your own history, and about the true nature of the threat we face. As they moved deeper into the ancient station, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing around her. Here, in this hidden corner of space, she would learn truths that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Nova walked beside her, its presence a comforting constant in this sea of revelations. Together, they had started something remarkable. A reunion of teacher and student species, separated by millennia, but united by a common threat and a shared love of knowledge. The sanctuary's lights brightened as they passed, as if the station itself was awakening from a long slumber. Somewhere in its vast databanks lay the key to saving both their peoples, if only they could find it in time. Legacy of Two Worlds. Deep within the sanctuary's central archive, Sarah stood before a holographic display that showed the approaching archivist fleet. Dozens of ships, each capable of destroying a small moon, methodically swept through nearby systems. Their trajectory was clear. They were heading straight for Earth. 3 days at most, Vega announced, its warriors' patterns pulsing with controlled urgency. Once they reach the solar system, they'll begin their standard protocol, devastating Earth's defense systems before launching their collection ships. They don't just take knowledge, Atlas added, projecting images of previous archivist invasions. They strip entire worlds of their culture, their history, their very identity. What they can't store, they destroy. Sarah felt Nova's presence at her side, its patterns radiating determination. Over the past week, they had worked tirelessly to understand the sanctuary's defensive systems and the true nature of the archivist threat. What they'd discovered had changed everything. Show them, Sarah said to Nova. Nova stepped forward, interfacing with the sanctuary's ancient computers. The holographic display shifted, revealing patterns within patterns, a complex web of energy signatures that connected the archivist ships. They're not just a fleet, Sarah explained, her voice tight with excitement. They're a network. Each ship is part of a larger consciousness. That's why they've been unstoppable. They think and act as one. But that's also their weakness, Lyra interjected. Nova discovered that the archivist's unified consciousness makes them vulnerable to the same technology we once used to share knowledge between species. The plan they had devised was audacious, perhaps impossible. The sanctuary's remaining power would be channeled into a massive burst of psychic energy, the same kind that allowed Nova's people to share thoughts and emotions, but amplified 1,000-fold. If it worked, it would temporarily disconnect the archivist fleet's hive mind, leaving them confused and vulnerable. The burst will only last minutes, Atlas warned, and will burn out most of our remaining systems in the process. We'll never be able to use the sanctuary again. Minutes are all Earth's defense forces will need, Sarah said. I've already sent an encoded message to Dr. Webb. Despite everything, he believed me. They'll be ready. Nova's patterns swirled with a complex emotion that Sarah had learned to recognize as bittersweet hope. The alien touched the display, bringing up an image of Earth, beautiful, blue, and terrifyingly vulnerable. Through their connection, Sarah felt Nova's deep love for humanity's homeworld, nurtured through millennia of secret guardianship. The burst will affect us too, Vega reminded them. All psychic connections will be temporarily severed, including yours. Sarah looked at Nova, her heart tightening. Their mental bond had become so natural, so essential, that the thought of losing it, even briefly, was painful. But they had no choice. Earth's survival depended on their success. The sanctuary's ancient warning systems flashed to life. The archivists had arrived ahead of schedule, their massive ships darkening the stars. "They've detected us," Atlas announced, his patterns shifting to emergency protocols. Multiple ships on approach vector. "Start the sequence," Lyra commanded. "Sarah, Nova, get to the transmission chamber. You'll need to be at the focal point when the burst hits." As they raced through the sanctuary's corridors, the station shuddering under the first archivist attacks, Sarah grabbed Nova's hand. The alien's skin pulsed with shared emotions, fear, determination, and something deeper that needed no translation. The transmission chamber was a sphere of pure crystal, hovering in the sanctuary's heart. As Sarah and Nova took their positions, the air itself seemed to vibrate with building energy. 10 seconds. Atlas's voice echoed through the chamber. "Brace for power surge." Nova turned to Sarah, its patterns forming words they had practiced together. "Whatever happens, thank you for believing in me." Sarah squeezed Nova's hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The sanctuary's remaining power converged on their position. Sarah felt Nova's consciousness expand, connecting with its fellow survivors, reaching out to touch the vast, cold mind of the Archivist Collective. Through their bond, Sarah became aware of an impossible vastness. Millions of minds linked together across space and time, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. Then everything exploded into light. The burst rippled outward faster than thought, catching the Archivist fleet in mid-attack. Ship after ship went dark as their neural network collapsed. Through the chamber's crystal walls, Sarah watched the massive vessels drift aimlessly, their perfect coordination shattered. But she barely registered the victory. The severing of her connection with Nova felt like losing a piece of herself. The alien's patterns had gone completely dark, its consciousness withdrawn behind barriers of biology and physics. The silence was deafening. Then, in the darkness, Sarah felt a touch on her hand. Nova stood beside her, its skin gradually rekindling with faint patterns. Though their mental bond was gone, the alien's eyes held all the warmth and understanding they had shared. Nova's patterns shifted slowly, deliberately, forming English words across its skin. Not all connections need to be psychic. Sarah laughed through her tears, pulling Nova into a fierce embrace. Around them, the sanctuary systems were failing, but through the crystal walls, they could see Earth's defense fleet arriving through hyperspace. Humanity had answered the call. Hours later, as they watched Earth's ships coordinate with Nova's people to round up the last confused Archivist vessels, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The sanctuary was lost, but its legacy would live on. Humanity now knew it wasn't alone in the universe, and more importantly, knew it had allies. Nova stood at the shuttle's viewport, its patterns rippling with plans and possibilities. Though they could no longer share thoughts directly, Sarah had learned to read her friend well enough to know what it was thinking. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Somewhere out there, other survivors of Nova's people were hidden among the stars. Other sanctuaries waited to be discovered. And now, with humanity as allies, they had a real chance to rebuild what was lost. Not as separate species, but as partners in a greater legacy. The stars beckoned, full of both danger and promise. But whatever the future held, they would face it together. The silent guardian and the human who had given it back its voice, pioneers of a new chapter in the story of two worlds. As their shuttle set course for Earth, Nova's patterns formed one final message: ready for another adventure. Sarah smiled. Always.